flicked it on, so you were right. And okay. Hey, Miguel, can you do the cowbell honors, please? Never mind. That's okay. It's a great honor to kick off the Beit Midrash. There you go. He's going out there too. Are we good? Okay. Week 2 of the introduction to the soul. Obviously, this is a very, very deep topic, and like I said last week, you're going to start to see these ideas emerge, as someone has just recently told me. As they go through the prayers, they're seeing this idea that's always been there, they just didn't know to look for it. And you have to think back. There might be resistance to these ideas. These are new ideas. I don't like new ideas. It rattles what I think I already know. But at one point, a lot of people didn't know the New Testament was a Jewish book. And then they did. What if there's more to uncover? What if not only is it a Jewish book, it's a really Jewish book? There are really deep ideas that are hidden in the pages that we just don't know, we're not familiar with. So, opening questions from last week. Does anyone remember how many levels of the soul there are that we were looking at? 5. Good.
That was my hand.
That was your hand, but you had all the right fingers, so I counted. Has anyone started to apply this idea in your week? Have you started to think from kind of a soul perspective, try to get out of the fray of the day-to-day? Yeah? Where specifically, if you don't mind about my asking?
Sure. So I like to read a couple times for sections in a week, a couple 30 minutes at a time, that kind of thing, make progress. And I'm sitting there going like, oh, it's right there. And then in the prayers specifically, like it really shows up a lot. So yeah, it was very interesting to see it.
Good. Yeah. So obviously, when we're praying, when we're reading, it's there. But I also encourage you to try to look from that perspective when things are not going well in life. Remember last week, and we'll go into this in detail. The Nefesh is the lower level. It just wants to get through life and acquire and take. The Neshamah is the higher level. It wants to give. It's the part of us that's still connected to the higher level. So in the Midrash, the ancient Midrash, it says the Neshamah is from the heavens. The Gematria, the numerical equivalent of Neshamah and Hashemayim, are the same. So it's a really interesting point. All that to say, if we can tap into that when things are going bad, we can make sense of life in a different level. Whereas before, everything's happening to me, I don't like it, I'm mad, I'm a victim. Good.
Yeah, this will make you happy. No. Yeah, earlier this week I was dealing with some pettiness. And, I was trying to stop it with knowing that was my flesh. Yeah.
Awesome.
Rebuking myself.
Yeah, I think it changes the dynamic. You're dealing with pettiness. You can get mad. I'm a victim here. I'm not wrong. They're wrong. I'm going to dig in and meet that energy. Or you can say, okay, God's testing me for some reason. Right? God's putting some experience here for me to learn from. And I think when you do that, you basically hurdle every obstacle in life. Okay, so this is a building study. It will have made sense if you were part of the first week, or if you go back and if you're online and you're watching for the first time, watch week 1. I will do my best to go through these levels. But this week we're going to build on that. We're going to go through the first 3 levels. The 4th and the 5th are really on another. This would no longer be an introduction. We would be deeper into some content that we don't have time for. Nefesh is the lowest level. It's the animating force. We'll go into these in detail. Ruach is kind of the intermediary level above Nefesh. It's when you kind of you've awakened to something else in life beyond just acquiring. And Neshamah is that inner spark of who we are. It's our personality. It's what makes us a soul. Nefesh is in the domain of our actions and our deeds. So doing a mitzvah on the active level is very good for the Nefesh. Doing it with awareness of why we're doing it and connecting to the Creator, and it recruits multiple levels of the soul into what we're doing, and it elevates it. According to tradition, the Nefesh is given at birth, and that makes total sense. We need the body to survive. We need to live And the Nefesh is given at birth, and we begin breathing, and our body digests food, and everything is going well, and that's what happens when we're born. The Ruach comes around at the time, according to tradition, of a bar and bat mitzvah. And you'll notice a teen starts to interact with the world in a very different way than they did before. There's something to that. Lots of centuries and centuries of observation. There's some different connection here. And Neshamah is something we actually have to gain access to. We have to kind of work, and I'll explain why that is, but you have to actually kind of work to tap into what is inside of you. I like to look at it like software. We have unlocked software that it's not just given to you. You have to actually work to unlock that. You have to get to the next level. And the Neshamah, though it's in us, it will make sense by the time we get to the end of this today. The Neshamah is something we need to actually kind of do some work to reveal. I want to make a pivot here. I don't want to get too much into the anatomical, scientific, because we are talking about things that are really difficult to comprehend. But we thankfully have a great tradition. This is the point I want to kind of pivot. What we know already, 5 levels of the soul, 3 of which we're going to focus on today because those are the ones we will interact with all day in our interactions with other people and in life. And I want you to now pivot. About.org says, viewed from the point of view of man's service to God, these levels of the soul may be described as 5 ascending levels of awareness and communion with God. So the better we are at rectifying the brokenness in these aspects of us, or the occlusion, the better we are, the closer to the Creator we get. And the more we're able to tap into. Imagine living in that space that we were talking about, when Dave's talking about rising above that interaction. Imagine living in that space all the time. The world would be very different. There would be no sin. There would be no greed. There would be no abuse if everyone got to that level. And in fact, that's what the Messianic era is, from a consciousness standpoint. Absolutely. When the whole world is brought to that level, when God is one. And that's where we start to get into those higher levels of the soul. Okay, so this is and I'll use this next week as we'll go through the New Testament and kind of unpack some parables where these ideas exist. This is like a ladder, right? It's the ladder of the soul and how we get closer to the Creator. The very first level, Nefesh, we're starting at the ground level here. The Nefesh is the life force. It's associated with the body. It's what keeps us alive. And particularly, it's connected to the blood. And we'll look at a verse in a second about that. It governs our systems. Don't look at it as a bad thing. There's a real tendency in some of the traditions to look at the Nefesh as like this wild animal that we'd be better off not having. There's also a part of the tradition that says, we need this. There's a whole lot in the Talmud about that, and the Midrash about why we do need it and why it does serve us. In God's wisdom, we need to find a way to balance it. Breathing, heartbeat, everything that we don't have to think about. It's all built in, right? God gave us that. The only problem is it's prone to excess. It's prone to seek physicality, more of that. It's prone to chase things that we need in regulation, but chase it to the point where it can be your entire life's focus. Which brings the Nefesh into conflict with the Neshamah. Go ahead, Drake.
In all my readings, I don't think I've ever encountered a situation where an animal had a Neshamah. It was always people in the text.
That's right. So animals have a Nefesh, and it seems like some degree of a Ruach, but not a Neshamah, and the human versions of those are on a different level. But yeah, not a Neshamah, for sure. Which, when I grew up in the Catholic Church, I think no, animals don't have souls. I think they're, but the reality is, the tradition says something different.
Soul difference too. When you use the word soul, that means different things to different people. So.
Which is a great point. And I think we said that last week. If you came through a tradition that did not accurately or consistently pull these, because remember, these are 5 different words the Midrash told us are connected to the word soul. Now that got lost in translation, and other ideas I think filled the gap. So you can be a part of a church that's never heard this. And last week we looked at those verses. Why does Paul say soul and spirit? why does Ecclesiastes say soul and spirit? Why does that, right? There's a reason for those words.
One of the things I notice in Torah, like for example, the mitzvah surrounding scaring away the mother bird, is that you can, and according to Torah, you can wrong an animal. And if an animal can be wronged, then on some level, it's not just a clump, it's not just an object. If you can muzzle an ox while it pounds out the grain, and you're kind of tormenting this ox, or what have you.
Yep.
It's like it says, I think in Bamidbar, to pick up help, if you see your enemy out on the road and his donkey has fallen over, to help him pick his donkey up. The idea that you can wrong something kind of innately suggests that there's a twinkle of something there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the more elevated you are, the more you've climbed these levels of the soul, the more you can tap in and see that. You can see, oh, there's something here. But if you're stuck in that Nefesh level, you're not seeing anything. You're not seeing details of anything. You're just focused on your own business, your own world perspective. So keep this in mind, because the Nefesh is often grouped with the body. And it makes sense. The Nefesh is animating the body, which brings it into conflict with the Neshamah. And we'll unpack these in a second. But this is really the basis of what a lot of these verses say. In the Shema, it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, the Nefesh. Why? Because the Nefesh is going to resist that. The Neshamah is not going to resist that. Deuteronomy, make sure you do not partake of the blood, for the blood is the life. Now the word there is Nefesh, right? It's right there in the text. And you must not consume the Nefesh with the flesh. Interesting, right? So there's a reason for some of these laws of kashrut. And it's not just physical, and it's not just social. There might be a spiritual aspect to this that we were never told. Do not defile yourself. The word is actually nefesh. Do not defile yourself, your nefesh. Do not defile your soul, your lower level soul, by eating things that you shouldn't eat. Why? Because you're damaging your soul. You're making it less receptive to those upper levels. And that's what really a lot of these mitzvot are about. It's connecting with something, not just because you're supposed to, or it's a good thing to do and it looks good for people who are watching you. There's behind the scenes coding that you're optimizing when you follow these. And I believe a lot, and for sure it's in the tradition, it has to do with our soul receptivity to do that climbing. When we talk about Yom Kippur, which doesn't seem like it was that long ago, it's probably longer than it feels, but it says you are to afflict your nefesh, not yourself. You're to afflict your nefesh. Any guesses why we would starve the nefesh or fast for so long? Any guesses in this logic?
Weaken the nefesh. It raises the spirit and the Neshamah up.
Perfect. Yep. So Brad said it weakens. It actually it afflicts the nefesh, so it doesn't have quite the same control over you that it might every other day of the year, right? The 364 days, and there's a midrash around that. The Yetzer Hara, right? And it's this idea that Yom Kippur is the one day we become like angels. We arise above our lower level because we've tapped into Neshamah. Why? Because we silenced the Nefesh. And it says it right there. They didn't say spirit. It didn't say Neshamah. So why does it say that? Right? This is what the tradition is helping us with. You'll see this in the New Testament as well. And I'll unpack some verses next week, like I said. Peter's talking to, it seems, the Gentile people who are in the community, and he's teaching them entirely new concepts. These people don't have concepts like this where they came from. And he's saying, I urge you, keep away from the fleshly desires, right? That bodily, those things that you're chasing, because they battle against the nefesh. The word there is nefesh. And maintain good conduct, right? And it even connects with deeds, a sentence or two later, so that they see your good deeds. So we'll see very consistent language in nefesh and deeds. Right? It's this idea that there's something battling with our soul. And that's for the reason of glorifying God, as it says. Because when we overcome that, we elevate, we win.
The rabbi said recently that, Reverend Orthodox Rabbi, he said that the reason that we have to rejoin with our bodies for the resurrection is because we're judged, our deeds are judged. And the deeds were done in the body. The body is what the soul exerts its will on the body, but the body does the deeds. So the nefesh, yes, is choosing it, but even the physical body is doing the deed. And so that's why we have to be rejoined after death, be judged as a whole person before Hashem.
And the beautiful, and the body also gets the reward for the good that it did. And it's in Tractate Sanhedrin. There's a great parable about that. There's a blind man who wants to eat what's in an orchard, and there's a person who can walk. I mean, he can't walk, but he can see. And the two of them, the blind man gets on the shoulders of the guy who has legs, and it's a metaphor for the soul and the body. And they go in and they get caught, and they try to play a game. Well, I didn't do it. He did it. Right? He did it. Yeah, I can't do it myself. And it's that idea. It's this: you're going to be rewarded, but also there's a way to rectify those two and unite them. And that's the world to come. That's the resurrection of the dead. It's more than just people arising. There's more to it than that. There's a lot of soul rectification.
So, just out of general curiosity, if we're thinking about the layers of the soul, levels of the soul, how do we correspond this to lev? Do we correspond this to your strength? And how does it play into Yafta at all?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that in one slide here because we get to the heart language. So you're right on time. Optimizing the nefesh. Okay, so good. We know all this stuff now. We get it, the body and the soul, the body and the nefesh. Okay, here's what we do. Bring your physical aspects into spiritual alignment. Simple enough, right? Good luck. Study, giving, charity. Do things that the nefesh would normally not like. Giving when you want to keep, right? Like I said, the nefesh wants to take and hold and acquire. You're giving. You're getting outside of your comfort zone. There's reward in that beyond just the money or whatever someone receives. There's reward because you're overcoming the nefesh. You're overcoming that internal struggle to acquire and hold. Observe the commandments. Again, rabbis talk about this all the time. Is it better to do the commandments and know what you're doing, or just do them at the base level and just start somewhere, right? Grow in them over time. Avoid the things that damage your soul's purity. There's a lot in there. The words for unclean and impure also exist in the New Testament, so pay attention to them. What is it that damages the soul, that defiles your soul? Because it's in there. Right? It's a whole tradition behind those words. Start healthy habits and good deeds. Put some new physical things into play in your life that are healthy. Something small, doesn't have to be massive. And musar. And you're going to see musar at the bottom of every one of these lists because it's the brilliance of the tradition to make one very accessible, easy to begin practice that it affects all these levels, and it's musar. Any questions on that one so far? Nefesh, we're good? Got it? Lowest level? Okay, Ruach is the next level. This word's familiar to us. I think Ruach HaKodesh, right? The spirit. In the rabbinic language, heart is connected with the Ruach. It's the idea of the heart and the mind in some cases. Ruach is connected to our speech and our emotions. And Rabbi's Drash today, I was smiling because a lot of what he was saying was 100% reinforcing this idea. It influences our personality, right? So our emotions can over time become part of us physically. They can actually influence the body for better or for worse. But you can also, from a higher level, impose positive emotions that also help the body in time. So there's a dynamic between Ruach and Nefesh. Although, that said, Ruach is generally interchanged, the language, in the earlier times, the first century, the New Testament, some parts of the Talmud. Ruach is almost interchanged with Neshamah. And why? Because picture the body and the Nefesh. Ruach is that magnetic force that connects you with Neshamah. Does that make sense? You have to get up out of that animal tendency, and when you get to Ruach, you are now you're within shot of connecting to that inner part of you. I want you to grasp that. However, Ruach and Neshamah are almost, if you had to pair these out, I don't want to learn 5 levels, I want to learn 2. Great. The body and Nefesh, Ruach and Neshamah. Because now you're entering the space of spirituality. The Ruach, though, is still, because it's connected to the Nefesh, don't get too locked in on like the visuals. That's why I didn't put a lot of visuals in this. I didn't specifically want to create images that tie you in. I try to leave it mostly words. Ruach and Neshamah are in proximity, so your emotions can be drawn into a bad place if the Nefesh gets control. Does that make sense? Right? You can respond in fear, or you can respond with emunah. It just depends on how strong those physical, earthly desires are in your life. And there are people who today are 100%, if not 100, majority driven by lower level reactions. They're stuck in fear. They're stuck in whatever the world wants to distract them from. And the Neshamah doesn't have a real chance to exert influence because they're focused in the immediate and here and now. They're not thinking about what's next, the next life or anything. Okay. And this again goes back to the drash. Improper speech or unmanaged emotions can sever this connection with the Ruach and prevent us from getting to the next level. This is why Lashon Hara is so damaging. We've done entire teachings on Lashon Hara and some of these things. What I didn't tell you before is this is the reason why. This is why when, let's say, anger, the sages, and even Paul and even Yeshua as well, they talk about anger being very detrimental. The sages say that anger and Lashon Hara is like idol worship. How is that possible? Remember, we did a teaching on this? It does the same damage. It defiles your soul to the same level as if you were worshiping idols. Same level of damage. So this is what we're talking about. So the Ruach is the emotions and the words. You will see very consistent language in this throughout I just threw a few in here. There are many. Fashion a pure heart in me, Lord, and create in me a steadfast spirit. Often spirit is the word, but Ruach. Joshua was talking about how they lost heart. They lost the ability to go on, and no one had any more spirit, right, left because of you. For the eternal, your God is the only God in heaven above and on the earth below. Another one. Don't let your Ruach be quickly vexed, for anger abides in the breast of fools. And again, we see this idea that anger can sever the strength or that upward process. If you're on a spiritual track and you are moving up and you let yourself get pulled into these lower level emotions, you're going back down the rungs of the ladder towards Nefesh. You can repent, but you don't want to make a habit of that. Right? Ezekiel. So this has a lot to do with the Messianic era we were talking about. So the Messianic era is when these levels are rectified and God gives a new heart. Well, how do we do that? Because we get a new upper level capacity in our spirit. It's tied, it's connected. Does that make sense? Right? Because right now we know we're not in the optimal state. Think back to week 1. We know the soul's not in a great state. It will be fixed, and the third point was we can fix some of that in our time. We can do some of this in our time, but the Messianic era is when all of these things are made manifest across the world.
But the Messianic era is followed by a rebellion.
Oh yeah, Messianic era is not a overnight restoration. And that's why there's a lot of discussion about how long it is, because things have to change, and it's going to take a while to change. Every opinion on how long it will be is leaving room for that, because there will be rebellion. You'll still have a Yetzer Hara for a good portion of the Messianic era. But in its fullness, because the Messianic era goes into the world to come, by the time we get to that, these problems are resolved.
But doesn't the scripture show a Messianic era of 1,000 years, and then afterward, where Yeshua reigns, for the roundabout era, there's peace, and then the people and Satan rebel, there's a battle, he crushes them, and then we go on. So yeah, I don't see it as it seems like it's very definite stages to me.
Yeah, I don't see the clarity. That's a tradition, and there are in fact stages that have to happen beforehand. But fast forwarding, that could be a teaching on its own, because the Messianic era there's a lot that's going on from where we are today to the world to come, which is the resurrection of the dead. And that is where the tradition comes into play. And the church has a tradition, and different parts of Judaism have tradition.
From a Hasidic standpoint, I would like to toss in that if we strictly look at the Messianic age as a physical time and place, then we miss the opportunity for the spiritual to take place. So those time and places, those resurrections or cleansings can be in the soul as well, and that's what we're talking about. So I mean, in Hasidic Judaism, you're given the opportunity to rectify your sin here, so that you don't have to rectify it there. And identifying that and giving praise to Hashem when they happen without reacting in anger, you can, and according to that teaching, you can rectify your soul of the past sin for whatever that was given.
Yeah, there's a definite difference in kind of at least the place, and I said this last week, I think, with fairness to the parts of the church I grew up in, it's sort of, okay, I'm saved, now I wait until I get taken out of here. And the Jewish view says, and 1 Peter says this, we have to hasten, we have to continue to grow and develop and bring holiness here in the meantime. And that I think has become the big difference in the church that I think Messianic Judaism has to reconcile. The Jewish world is actively trying to bring Messiah through effort, deed, works, holiness. And a lot of the church, unfortunately, has this idea that we don't have to do anything and we just can't wait to get out of here. And I think that your point is we're bringing that into this world now. And in fact, that's what every mitzvah is about. So we see this again in Luke. There are many places in the New Testament we see this. The good person out of the good of the treasure of his heart produces good. And the evil person out of the evil treasure produces evil. And then again, right, so heart, good and evil. Out of the mouth of the heart, abundance speaks. So we're seeing the connection between heart, good, evil, and words. We see this in Mark 7. There's a discussion about hand washing. It seems to be a very nuanced discussion. We talked about that a couple years ago, I think 2 years now, about the Hillel and Shammai, the differences between hand washing principles. Jesus wasn't against washing hands. He just was pointing out that they're so worried about different nuances that they were forgetting that out of a person's heart come and all these terrible things, which are thought-related, speech-related actions. Right? But again, the heart. So that's back to David's point. Ruach is the language of the heart. Really interesting article. Go ahead. I'm going to hold that. Good.
So in addition to this, it actually implies that through the Spirit we have free will and conscience to be able to make the choices and decisions.
We have to. Yeah, we have to.
And that's done through the Spirit.
That's what we're here for. And she brings up the question of free will. If we didn't have a Yetzer Hara or an evil inclination or the ability to choose wrong, choosing correctly wouldn't matter. It would just be default. Right?
So, just out of curiosity, if we're trying to set up the timeline here of like when we were created, we had a certain configuration, and then when we defiled that temple, which is Eden, the world shatters to a certain degree or completely shatters, and then we can make rectifications along the way. Is there an overarching like paradigm that like this is the level of rectification that we can achieve? This is we can rectify and then we can lose. There's part of redemption, if you will. There's like pieces of we can get one part of it over here and not a part in this age. Is there something like that we should be looking at as well?
So I think if I'm understanding you, is each generation able to unlock some new,
or even lose it too? Because like if I think of like King David sitting on the throne of Israel, bringing peace to the land, that's a rectification. But then when the land is lost, that's a loss of that rectification. And then when Ezra and Nehemiah help and comfort come and restore things, and they bring a piece of it, and then the next generations restore it a bit more. And so generations can gain or lose it. And sometimes it's apparently gone, and sometimes it's not yet apparent that it is gone.
Yeah, so this sounds like, if I'm understanding the tradition, that as we get further and further away from Sinai, we get spiritually more dense. But more information and more tools are dispersed in each generation to help kind of close that gap. All of it is for the sake of rectifying. But the whole world doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
Think back to Abraham, and if 10 righteous people could have saved an evil city, right? That's the principle, that as this information becomes available, we make use of it. But every generation is different, which is why we have different problems in each generation, which is why I would say sexual morality is, there's a system to this. It's why that and distraction and entertainment are a major issue in our time.
One of the, I think, best examples in the Torah of tikkun, just the intergenerational tikkun, was, I think, with the case of Levi and Shimon. So Levi and Shimon, they wipe out Shechem, and then their father, Yaakov, curses them into oblivion, basically saying that, Levi, when you go into the land, you'll be scattered and you'll be landless. Then generations later at Mount Sinai, Levi does the same thing again and puts swords on his belt, and this time defending the sanctity of God against the egel, the golden calf. So what was his vice in the onset became his virtue, and he did it through in a sort of a Levi kind of way, and so he became scattered in the land because he was a priest, not because he was just forlorn and landless. And so I think there is something to the idea that a generation can make a tikkun within a family, for example, for instance, according to biblical record.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I do think that God is constantly moving us onward to redemption. Where we stall, like I said last week, if in your personal life you stall, God will shove you to the next thing. You may not love it, but if you're tapping into a Neshamah, you can see, I see where this is going. I thank that person because they just helped me get to the next level. He's doing that on the collective level as well. Really interesting article. I just want to throw this out there. We won't take any questions on it because I don't know what to do with it, but it will, I have to go through and finish reading it. But groundbreaking research suggests organ transplant patients are inheriting donors' memories and personalities. And this is most common in heart transplants. What do we know? This is the first generation or two where we've done transplants as far as I know. We're transplanting hearts.
Successfully.
What does that mean? Is there, as the scientists say, cellular memory? Or are pieces of personality and spirit influences, are they coming over? What do we know, right? It's fascinating, though. It just means there's more than just tissue going on inside the human body. There's a lot more than that. And again, there's a PubMed article in there as well. Okay, optimizing the Ruach. Bring your emotional and your linguistic, your language into spiritual alignment. That's very difficult, right? We have hardwired pathways of, this happened to me, I'm going to get angry. And they're so responsive and autonomic that we don't have a real way to stop them sometimes. We clean up the mess afterwards. Try to put a little bit of a pause in any reaction and try to tap into that higher level. Don't accept the pettiness as the normal attack. Maybe there's something going on in their life. I'm just going to be me. I'm going to learn from this experience, right? So always try to find a way to bring your emotion and your words into spiritual alignment. Clean up the language. No gossiping, no lashon hara. Speak positively, right? Speak life. Resist the influence of the nefesh. Don't let the nefesh, that lower level animalistic response, be your pattern. Try to go higher. Tap into that upper level capacity you have. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it, and the easier it will become in time. But it does take time. Did you? Okay. Musar. Everyone knows Musar? Did you have a hand up, Shane?
I did. And I've shared this with you a couple times as we've talked, but I think one of the biggest things that has helped me on this journey that I know is not going to ever end, but is the meditation practice that I think that in our Western culture we have no real concept of what it really is. But to detach and to become, to go up those levels, I don't see any other mechanism that we can do with intention to help in this path, where you begin to detach from not completely detached, but you are more observant of your lower levels of your soul, so that you can see that they are playing their role. They're there as a tool, so to speak. They have their function, but you're not in them and operating through those tools anymore. You're operating above them. I don't even know if that's a good explanation, but I just want to throw that out there, that sometimes in our culture, because we've never developed that habit, you don't have a mechanism. And I think it's something that hasn't been taught a lot, you know. It's helped me tremendously over the last 2 years or so that I've been doing it, you know.
What's one of the
just
biggest?
throw that out there.
No, it's great. Judaism does have meditation. Prayer should be meditation. What is one of the most staple aspects of meditating if you want to begin? What's one of the first practices you have to do?
Start with breathing.
Breathing. Ruach means wind, breath, spirit. Spirit comes from the word spiro, right? It's breathing, respiratory. Absolutely. It's and when we do that, we're getting out of the physical drives. We're changing our heart rate. We're allowing kind of a transcendent influence. I think what's happening when we meditate is we're silencing the Nefesh and we're letting the Neshamah kind of shine a little bit further than it would. But prayer should be that. Prayer shouldn't be just reading something and then moving on. It should be closer to that. And in fact, that's what it was. We say, how long would you say it takes us, Brad, to do the Amida, the Musaf? 15. In the Talmudic times, it was 3 hours. 1 hour before, 1 hour after, and 1 hour to do it. Could you imagine if we just made the Musaf a 3-hour prayer? Because they were doing something very different than what we do today. We'd have no. Yeah. So yes, I think you bring up a really good point. It's sometimes challenging to find a place to start. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan has some really good books on getting started in a biblical way.
Even just meditation, I mean, yes, our prayer is supposed to be meditation, but I think overall, just in general as a society, it's just being able to sit in silence and not have a distraction where we're actually just sitting with our thoughts and our feelings, period.
I would say that distraction is one of the biggest challenges in our generation. And I think when you start to tap into Neshamah, you'll see that that's intentional. That severs us from being able to do what we're supposed to do. It's intentional. It's like it's an engineered program.
I wanted to speak to a little of that and a little of this. So everything about us requires breath. Holding your breath is detrimental. However, holding your speech is probably one of the best things, first things that you can do. So when I decided that to stop reacting with emotion, I was going to have to pause. I was going to have to count to whatever and not say anything first. But what came up was, as I paused, all these automatic responses that are built in. I've got a little catalog. If he says this, then I do that. If I do this, then he says that. It's the world is a stage, and we're all playing a part. But you do that, I did that as a form of efficiency too, because you find certain phrases that work to subdue an anger situation, or you develop phrases to encourage a more calm and loving response. And dealing with customer service in the medical field, I got a big catalog. But I'm trying to edit that, because it's not all positive, it's not all as loving as I would like it to be. It doesn't all cause the response and movement between me and somebody else that would honor this. Getting rid of the negative, adding the positive. And sometimes a positive is just, or, oh. You know? I mean, one-word responses can sometimes be very powerful. And it causes people to stop, usually. What?
Leaves them that like psychological awkwardness of you not meeting that energy.
Right.
And they feel like they are aware of it.
And every conversation you have, every breath that you expend, you have to ask yourself, is it worth this breath to say this negative thing that I want so much to say? But it's a discipline.
Sure.
It's a discipline. And it becomes, it's a practice until it becomes a habit. It's make it tell you, or what is that? Is that
20.
Fake it until you make it.
Oh.
So, just to add on that, I think, having gone through a lot of education in a fairly higher level, the ability to concentrate and to separate isn't just the spiritual, it's in life. If you really want to understand and start to master things, you have to separate yourself. There cannot be outside influences during that study, that musar, that where you're trying to really understand it. So it's also in our lives and our education. Spiritual as well as what we're trying to do, through our life elsewhere. So very important to develop that skill set.
Yeah, I think that earlier generations probably had a little bit of a leg up on us with avoiding distractions, or they had some practices. But in our time, you could even set time aside and someone will text you or call or whatever. It's good problems to have sometimes, but you can't stop everything from hitting us because we're so accessible today.
I'm not saying anything's wrong with the meditation or that it's got its point, it's got its place, it's a good thing, we should all do it. But when you can't stop and do a Mr. Miyagi style meditation, where you're just breathing in like this or whatever. I found this week as I was thinking about this, how to move beyond Nefesh and your day-to-day distractions. The Bible says to constantly pray, and that our minds need to be stayed on Him. So there has to be a concentration. Even when you're going up the stairs, when you're coming down to get something to eat and then going back to work, just praying as you're moving along the way. Just having even a basic thing, it can help lift you out of that without going through without the formal, like we pray 3 times a day, we like to fill in all those things, but even between those times, you can still keep your mind in peace because your mind is stayed on Hashem and on the Messiah. And it works. It really works. Like it's something that's easy to forget, but there's a reason they said to do it. There's a reason that it was given to us. This is a tool that we can use in any situation, even if we're not in the perfect setup. Because I know before I thought, well, I want to do this, but I don't have time to do it. And then if you do this, if you don't have that time, it still works. It may not be plan A, but plan B can be beneficial too.
That's a great point. The Mishnah Berurah says that that's what the blessings are for as well, to continue to give us all these points throughout the day where if we forget, we're washing hands, we say a blessing. We eat something, we say a blessing, right? It helps you remember to pray without ceasing. Couple more, bear with me. I think we're on okay time. Neshamah. Neshamah is related to our intellectual capacity. So Neshamah is actually, like I said earlier, it's outside of the time and space. It's that part of us that connects higher. And as Rabbi said in his drash, it connects us to understanding. And there's a lot of deep tradition around that idea, that verse that he quoted. But this is where we get into a kind of knowing state, right? God's doing something, but I don't like the way it looks, but I know that this is going somewhere. Right? It's when we begin to see how God operates in the world. This happened, doesn't look good, but later we see this happened, and then we know, but Neshamah knows what's happening in the moment, or at least has a feeling. It's that inner voice in us that says, just wait, you'll see. You'll see where this is going. It's who we are. It's pure. It wants to seek the Creator. Again, if we had only a Neshamah, we would never sin. We would never make the mistakes because the Neshamah is connected. And it's inside of us at all times. We're just not listening to it. Right? Well, here's another verse that kind of goes off of the back of Rabbi Peter's. But truly it is in the spirit in men, is the word spirit, the breath, right? So it's connected to the spirit, Neshamah, of Shaddai that gives them understanding. So Neshamah is how we reach Binah, the level of understanding. It's a higher level. Again, there's a very deep concept behind this. Maybe one day we'll get to it. But just keep it in mind. It's intellectual, but it's a little bit more than just academic intellectual. This is a spiritual connection of the mind with the Creator. Probably my most important point of this entire teaching series so far, our Neshamah is that inner aspect of us that wants to interact in the world freely. The only problem is it's enwrapped, enrobed in the Nefesh in the body and in the Ruach. So as long as those levels of us are not rectified, right? You can't have somebody who is studying and reading the Torah, but absolutely is not living a physically or emotionally or verbal, in alignment. You might see people who look like they are, but these are levels that build on top of each other. If you are brilliant in Torah knowledge, you know everything, you memorize all the verses, but you are not clean on these lower levels, you have a big problem. It's not sustainable, and at some point you will see the fallout. But the Neshama has to, in our time, over time, with work, shine more, reveal more of who it is. And in order to do that, we work on those lower levels of the soul to kind of make them clear.
So if you have like the high priest who speaks and it comes true because he's the high priest, and he's prophesying basically, but he's not rectified, is that an overpowering of the Neshama over those other levels, or is it not related to this at all, or?
Do you mean give me an example of a high priest like Caiaphas?
Yeah, exactly.
So I would say that the sages categorically say that those leaders were not plugged in at all. And because of that, they were doing, it says in Tractate Yoma, they were doing Torah and mitzvot, but they were lacking in the spiritual aspects. They had baseless hatred. They had Lashon Hara. And because of it, it was a big shell, and Hashem smashed the temple as a result of it. So absolutely, they were not models, even in that time.
I get that, but Caiaphas does prophesy basically. And
So does Balaam. God will use
Whoever he wants.
Yeah, God will. Okay.
Yeah, Balaam. Yeah.
Yeah, Balaam is an example, and no one can make sense of that in the Talmud. Like, how did Balaam? He's a pagan. How did he do? Because God will use people.
As long as it's confusing to everybody, I feel better about it.
Yeah. But for us, in our time, our goal is to get all three of those levels, all of those. Just think of them as access, like the way we access and interact with the world. The better we can do on the physical, the emotional, and the intellectual, the more we can shine through of who we're supposed to be. I only have time for one more, and I'll bring this other one next week. Last quote, I'll end it here. Rabbi Steinsaltz says the Neshama is not driven by the Nefesh, right? We said that. It exists beyond. It's spiritual and abstract. It's not directly involved with the human body, like the Nefesh is. It's involved with the sanctity and with the human relationship with God. So, again, the homework, tap into Neshama through the week. Look at what God is doing through situations around us, especially the ones we don't like. Right? The ones where we're happy about it, peace. But the ones that we don't like, the annoyances, try to tap into another level. Why is this happening? What am I learning from this? Why am I waiting for this thing? Am I being taught patience? Right? Use those examples to tap into Neshama. Next week, we'll unpack a little bit more of these in the parables, and I think we'll really drive it home in the New Testament from that point. Any last questions?